You're listening to Three Things to Know with Stephanie Haney. The people you want to hear from and the things you need to know in Northeast Ohio and beyond. Get in the know, stay in the know. Starting right now.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the very first episode of Three Things to Know from WKYC Studios here in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm Stephanie Haney, and I will be your host for this fun adventure. So what are we going to do here? You might be wondering. Well, we are going to talk to people that you want to hear from and tell you what you need to know. It really is that simple. So let's get started with our very first topic, something that we all need to know: how to build a bridge and get over it. No, I'm just kidding. Not get over it, but how to build a bridge and connect with people that we don't necessarily agree with. Yes, I am talking about politics. You might have been able to guess that. Let's be honest. Election 2020 has been intense. I think that's putting it kindly, and we are all so divided politically right now. There was a recent survey by the Pew Research Center, and they surveyed supporters of both President Donald Trump and President-elect Joe Biden. And in that survey, they found 1 in 5 people said that they believed they shared the same core American values and goals across the political divide. That's not a lot of overlap, so clearly we need help. So I brought in an expert to show us the way. Psychologist and professor Dr. Tania Israel. Dr. Israel was recently on Today with Hoda and Jenna. She's been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Publishers Weekly. She was also on NPR's All Things Considered, so obviously she knows what she's talking about. And she's a published author as well. And she's not only going to talk to us about how to talk to people that we don't agree with politically, but also when to talk to people that we don't agree with politically. And what I mean by that is when it's even possible, because it's not always possible. Now, most of the time it is, but there are definitely times when it's not. So she breaks that down for us as well. And she literally wrote the book on this, by the way. Her book, her brand new book, it's called Beyond Your Bubble: How to Connect Across the Political Divide, Skills and Strategies for Conversations That Work. So we're going to get you in the know on this starting right now. So let's bring her in, my very first guest on Three Things to Know, Dr. Tania Israel. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you coming on to talk about something that is very timely right now, bridging the political divide.
Thank you. Yes, it does seem like something on people's minds these days, right?
It absolutely is. And what great timing for a book like yours to come out, Beyond Your Bubble: How to Connect Across the Political Divide, Skills and Strategies for Conversations That Work. Before I think we can even get into that, I think something that we lack sometimes is sort of just setting a starting point. So let's start there. What is a political conversation? Because not everyone tends to agree on even that starting point. What is political and what isn't?
It's true. Some things are more obviously political if they have to do with candidates or policies, but underlying our views about candidates and policies are our values and our experiences and all kinds of things that sort of create the conditions for the opinions that we have, for the way that we vote, all of that. And I hear people say also, this isn't a political issue, this is a moral issue. But actually our morality does underlie our opinions. And it turns out that people on the left and the right all have morality, but just have different priorities in terms of their moral foundations. And so I would say that so many things can be political, because even things that are about values that aren't specifically about candidates and policies, have those kinds of implications.
So lots of things can have those political implications for sure. So we won't necessarily narrow it down to specific topics or anything today. Then the next question becomes, when there is so much hostility out there, why isn't just avoiding these political conversations the answer? I guess, why should people even put themselves through what can be very difficult interactions?
Well, I've done workshops about how to have conversations, how to have dialogue across a political divide, and I always ask people, what brings you to this? What makes you interested in doing this at all? The number one reason that I hear is there's someone in my life who I care about and I want to stay connected to, but we have disagreements about politics. And people have other motivations too. Certainly some people want to persuade or convince others. Some want to find common ground. And some people say, I simply cannot fathom how people can think or act or vote as they do.
Right.
So, of course, you don't have to have these conversations. Being able to have them it's an opportunity. It's not a mandate. But people have reasons that they want to. People have reasons that they want to stay connected, because people are important to them or because there's something that they want to achieve or accomplish in those conversations.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. The goal of what it is that you want to accomplish or achieve, because I'm sure that has to change your approach there. Is it important to have a particular goal going into these kind of scenarios? Like, is your goal to change a mind? Is it important to you to just be heard? And what kind of impact does that have on how you go about it?
The first thing I'll say is I think it's helpful to be aware of what your motivations are. Actually, after the 2016 election, when it was really clear that there was this division and people weren't really understanding each other across the divide, the first resource I made, long before I wrote the book, was I created something that I call the flow chart that will resolve all political conflict in our country.
Oh, I need that flow chart, please. Yes, we'll be sharing that.
Yes. And in fact, if you're like, I need that for Thanksgiving, it's actually available in a Thanksgiving themed placemat because it seems like that's what people need most right now.
That's amazing. I love that.
But my goal of doing that and making it as a flow chart where there are decisions that people have to make throughout there was really to try to help people to be more intentional about whether or not they're going to have these conversations. And if you are going to have them, what do you want to accomplish and what can you do to best accomplish those goals? So that's the first thing I'll say. So yes, I think it is good to be aware of your motivations. The second thing I'll say, you said, well, I'm sure that there are different approaches that you would take depending on what your motivation is. It turns out that no matter what your motivation is, any of those things I talked about, connecting, common ground, persuasion, trying to understand, for any of those, you still want to do the same things. You actually want to have a conversation that promotes connection and understanding. Because even if what you're trying to do is to convince someone, the best way to do that is not to come in there with, ready with all your ammunition of your ideas and your facts and your research and just like throw it at them. That's not the thing to do. The thing you want to do in any case is try to connect with them and try to understand them better. Because even if you're going to try to persuade somebody, then you really need to understand not only what their opinions are, but what are their values and experiences that are underlying those views.
So really sort of trying to get an understanding of where people are coming from and understanding their perspective.
Exactly, because that's going to help you find the right way of approaching whatever the issue is from their perspective, which is going to be more effective than approaching it from your perspective.
Interesting. Okay, so I know we didn't put too fine a point on what is political versus what is a morality issue, but there are some things that we can definitely agree, I think we can definitely agree are not political, like when you're talking about a person's existence, for example, like the existence of transgender people, just for one example, or when we talk about the reckoning that the nation is having with systemic racism. Now, I think that there are some people, though, who don't maybe accept those factual situation. So what's your recommendation there? How do you build a bridge when someone doesn't agree with your existence or with something that's really personal to your safety?
I think that we're struggling a lot with exactly those issues right now. How do we have these conversations? So the first thing that I want to say is that our perceptions of people on the other side are typically distorted in a way, that this is just something that's human nature of what we do, that we see our own views as being really well-founded and logical and considering everybody's needs, and we see other people as being irrational and unkind and more affiliated with just a political position than with a really good reason. So the first thing to know is that as we are imagining having these conversations with people, we might be thinking about them as being more extreme in a view than they really are. So when we say, well, how can I talk to somebody who doesn't even think I should exist? Then I think that some of what we're doing is sort of imagining really what the implications of their opinion is, that they might have something that they say or something they post on social media, or even a question that they ask that makes you go, well, then they're completely dismissing my existence. And so first of all, you don't have to have a conversation with somebody who you feel like is really completely dismissing your existence. And so
Right.
that's the first thing, protect yourself where you need to. And maybe first find out a little bit more about, like, what do they mean by that? So like what, when you say all lives matter, what does that mean to you? And finding out more about it, because what we might be doing is someone says all lives matter and we're imagining, white supremacists carrying tiki torches, and that's who anyone who says all lives matter is to us.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much more variation, and really people are so much more toward the middle in their views than we imagine them to be, that it's such an opportunity to find out a little bit more about, well, what's behind that? What's underneath that? And we might really have a misunderstanding of what that means and assuming that it's more extreme than it is.
I think that's such a great point to make, because we just don't always share the same language with the person that we feel that we're disagreeing with, and we might not even necessarily be disagreeing with them if that we could just get on the same page in terms of that language. So thank you for making that point. And we did sort of touch on this just a moment, but I really loved how you put that it's an opportunity to have these conversations. It's not a mandate, and how, of course, your safety is of the utmost importance. But is there ever a point, really, when you should just walk away and it's just not possible to find common ground?
It's often not possible to find common ground. And so again, this goes back to, what are your motivations? If you really want to connect or persuade or find common ground or just understand, the best thing for you to do is to be in that conversation. But the thing that I know is that people have more than one want. So you might want to maintain that connection, but you also might want to feel affirmed in your, in your own views on things. And you might want to find common ground, but you also might want to vent about people who have different views than you have. So I think it's important to understand what it is that you need and to figure out how to get that need met. So if you want to vent or have your views affirmed, you probably want to talk to somebody who already agrees with you. And, that's easy enough to do. Like, go and do that and get the support that you need. And if you still then want to, connect or convince or common ground, any of those things, then you can go have a different kind of conversation with people who disagree with you. But just know that if you're trying to be effective in those conversations, then there are different ways of doing that than venting, and you're probably not going to get your views affirmed. I hear people say, well, why should I have this conversation when I don't feel heard? What should I do when I don't feel heard? And so I always go back to, well, what are you trying to accomplish in this conversation? And if that's your main goal, then have a conversation with somebody who's really going to be able to do that more easily.
Right. Focus on what your need is and how to get that need met. That's a great message. Now, from a broader perspective here, in your professional opinion, if you do find yourself in a situation where you just simply have to avoid that political conversation, do you think that you can have a meaningful relationship with someone else, if that's something that's important to you, if these political conversations are important to you, if you can't have that conversation? Because we hear so often about houses divided. Maybe one spouse is a Republican, one spouse is a Democrat, even not to put it in party lines, but just on different spectrums along political lines. Is it possible long term? How sustaining can that be to actually have a meaningful relationship with someone if you have determined, we just are not going to be able to talk about this?
So it turns out that there's all kinds of other things that people connect on, other than politics. And
really, is there? No, I'm just kidding. I know that's
is that
true.
even possible? Yeah, people can talk about, it might be like, okay, we care about raising our children together, and we have similar ideas about how to do that, and that's really meaningful to us. Or we're really involved in our community, and we think that that's important. But it doesn't have to be about politics. It can be, we're really into coaching soccer and being on the PTA, and so there are all kinds of things in our lives outside of politics, and people definitely can do that. And here's the key, though. I think it's important then to not have that stereotype in mind of who that other person is based on how they vote, or something, an opinion that they have. And that's that part of, if you have that conversation, it can help to correct those misperceptions. Or if you can manage to do that without that conversation, then sure, I think it's very possible for people to maintain friendships and relationships without that. It's harder right now because this is so much the context of what the news is and what people are talking about and what's at the forefront of people's minds.
Speaking of what is at the forefront of people's minds, I don't think we can have this conversation without addressing the elephant in the room, which is the pandemic, and we are very isolated right now. Do you think that the pandemic has made people even sort of more isolated and secluded and resolute in their own perspectives and their own bubbles? Or do you think, is that just an easy excuse for what's going on right now with the division that we're seeing?
I think that the pandemic is, and the way people are dealing with the pandemic, is a result in some ways of the dynamics that already existed in terms of division, but it's also contributing to it. And part of why it's contributing to it is because the best way to have these conversations is face-to-face, not Facebook to Facebook.
Oh, yes, that is such a great point. I hate text messaging and just communicating in that way. So much gets lost. It's the worst.
And so much of the way that people are staying connected with others right now is through social media. And social media is a really problematic way to try to fully understand somebody else's view and to be able to have a kind of communication back and forth that's going to deepen understanding. I always say that the only useful comment that you can make on somebody's post, if you disagree with them, is to say, I'm really curious to hear more about what you have to say. Can we set up a time to talk? And the challenge right now in the pandemic is that it's harder to create those talking experiences. So whereas we might have run into other people in our community before, that we might be gathering with family for occasions, that's not happening so much right now. But even a phone call, because you can hear somebody's tone, or Zoom or FaceTime or something where you can see somebody's nonverbals, that is so much better for just recognizing you're having a conversation with a whole and complex person, rather than just with a slogan or a statistic.
Going back to the point you made earlier about how going in to sort of develop that engagement or connection with someone, it's not a great idea to sort of marshal all your facts and just come at them like pow, 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 pow. Social media is great for that. Social media is great for really marshaling all your facts, getting something typed out, having a draft, reading it over, moving things around, going back and editing something before you post it, even editing something after you post it. In some cases, Facebook is notorious for that. You can go back and edit a post or a comment. And I don't think that I have seen much of that comment that you suggested, which is, tell me more about that. I'd like to hear more about that. Let's set up that conversation, whatever way we can have it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Elaboration is an amazing tool. So it turns out that if you do have that opportunity and you want to take that opportunity to have conversation with somebody across political lines, there's a couple of things that you can do to have a productive conversation. And so the first thing is listening. And that seems obvious, but it's not. What we really want to do is listen to understand rather than listening to respond. Because when we're listening to respond, somebody's talking, and what we're doing in our mind then is creating that argument that what are we going to say back to them? And if instead we listen and really try to understand what somebody's saying, and then when we have an opportunity to speak, instead of saying our own opinion to contrast with that, we reflect back what that person said. We reflect back what we understood from what they said. And first of all, that makes sure that we really got it, that we really got what they were saying. And second of all, it helps them to feel understood. And if they feel understood, that's going to help with that connection. And it's probably going to make them more interested in what you have to say than if you just, came in and you weren't listening to them either.
That is such a great point that I think we get lost on, that listening to understand versus listening to respond. It's easy to get caught up in your head with your next point. Again, which goes back to that point of just not trying to fire off your points and be right versus understanding.
Yes. Yes.
So
And you were talking about, like on Facebook, like crafting our message. And people keep asking me, how should I be crafting my message when I'm having these conversations? So it's like, it's really not so much about crafting your message. It's really about, giving that person space to speak, reflecting back. That's what's going to help you to reach your goals. And when you do want to share your own views, you don't want to share the stats and slogans. That's not as effective as if you actually share more of your story of how did you come to form your opinions? What sort of experiences have you had in your life that contributed to that? What kinds of people have you encountered who have influenced that? And that's not only a more effective way of sharing your views, but frankly, it's just a more interesting conversation to have.
That is so true. And it gets said over and over again. People won't necessarily remember what you say, but they will remember how you made them feel. So if you're firing those statistics off at people, that's just a fact that they can look up online that they might not remember. But if you share a story that really has an impact on someone that makes them feel a certain way, that might be something that sticks with them a little more poignantly.
Absolutely. I love that Maya Angelou quote because it also makes me remember that if they feel understood by me, if they feel like I care about what they say, and if they also feel safe in that conversation. So if I'm getting really heated and my voice is going up and I'm getting really energized by it, that can be that can feel unsafe to somebody else. And so the best thing that we can do is, if we're able to manage our own feelings and be interested in and curious about and respectful of somebody else's views, that's the best foundation that we can have for a conversation.
Well, Dr. Israel, I have to ask you now, with all of this on the table, all of these great tools to connect, what is your outlook? Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic about our ability to really come together and sort of work through this division that we've been seeing that, if, quite frankly, feels very intense as of late? What's your outlook on it, and why do you feel that way?
The more I do this work, the more optimistic I feel.
Oh, I love to hear that. Great.
I know. There's a few reasons for that. The first is that, like I said, our views of the other side are distorted, and that's the bad news. But the good news is, if we know that, we can correct those misperceptions. And the best way to correct those misperceptions is through connection and through conversation. And there are some tools to do that. Like I said, listening, managing emotions. These are, trying to take somebody else's perspective. These are tools that we know work for these things. And they're tools that we can learn. And so if we're not already doing them, we can develop these tools, we can implement them, and then they're going to help not only in conversations across political lines, but these same skills are what's going to help us to be better parents, better partners, better coworkers and community members. And so I really see this moment of divisiveness as an opportunity where we can really strengthen ourselves as human beings, strengthen our relationships with other people, and even in doing that, strengthen our democracy.
That is great to hear, just from a perspective of the future of our nation. Absolutely. So we've touched on, this is just the tip of the iceberg, obviously, when it comes to how to actually navigate these conversations. Great tips here. Dr. Israel, your book, Beyond Your Bubble, who is the perfect candidate for that book? Who do you recommend should read it? Besides everyone, obviously, because it seems like something we all really need right now.
So it's definitely great for people who want to have these conversations and are feeling uncertain about how to do that or nervous about doing it and want some tools for it. So I think that that's the obvious candidate. But I'm also hearing from people who are reading it who are saying, just imagining having these conversations was stressing me out. And this book is helping me to feel better. So a lot of people seem to be watching the news and listening to public figures and imagining having conversations with those people, which is honestly probably not who we're mostly having those conversations with. But just that image of that is increasing people's stress. And so this is helping people to feel better just by reading it. So I think that's great. I also think it's a way of opening up that conversation. I thought, my gosh, with the holidays coming up, maybe it's a way that people can reach out to somebody and say, here's this book. I would love it if we can try to use some of these tools to really, reconnect and heal the relationship that we have. There's actually in the book, I created these fictional cousins, Kevin and Celine, and they have these conversations throughout the book using the tools that I'm describing there. So if people are having trouble imagining what those conversations could be like, it gives them an idea of how you can actually do this in a productive way.
What a great idea to read this book along with someone that you're trying to have that type of a conversation with. And great timing, like you said, coming up on the holidays. I love that. What a way to say, here, I'm invested in this productive conversation. I'd like you to be. Here's this. Let's set the ground rules for our conversation. I love that.
I also think it's great to practice the skills in a more low stakes situation before you go into having a more difficult conversation sometimes. Mm-hmm. So I think if people want to, grab a friend who's on the same side as they are politically and read that book together, or a book club can do it and practice those skills if they want to, or talk about how to implement it. I think that the more support that we have from other people, then the easier it is to actually engage.
Well, I know a great way for people to feel that support as they read this would be to connect with you. So, Dr. Israel, let me know, how can people connect with you on social media? What are your channels, handles? Let them know.
Sure. I'm BYB Dialogue for Beyond Your Bubble Dialogue on Twitter and Instagram. You can look at TaniaIsrael.com and you'll be able to find all the information there.
This has been so helpful, Dr. Israel. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I think we've got some really great tools here. And of course, people can go to those places to find more from you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm so happy that we've been able to have this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you, doctor. That was so great. I don't know about you guys. I definitely feel better after talking to Dr. Israel. I hope you do too. And I definitely wasn't kidding about getting that Thanksgiving placemat for all of us, by the way. That's going to be linked in the show notes here. And also that'll be linked on WKYC.com so that we can print that sucker out and have it with us at all of our virtual Thanksgiving dinners. And of course, I'll also have the links to connect with Dr. Israel there. So thank you very much to her. That gives me hope. I feel optimistic that we can bridge the gap and sort of bring that divide a little bit closer together. All right, moving on to our next thing that you need to know here. This is a segment that is literally called Need to Know, where we talk to people who are in the know here in Northeast Ohio. And what we talk about are those hidden gems, those things that can truly take you a lifetime to find if you don't just happen upon them on your own. So yeah, we are cutting right to the front of the line on that, starting right now. And for our very first Need to Know, we bring in our anchor and reporter, Tiffany Tarpley. Tiffany, thanks for being here on the show.
I am honored to be here and to be the first guest, right?
You are. You're our first guest, letting people know what
thank you.
Need to know here in Northeast Ohio. We had to get you, of course, because you have some very big things happening, which we will get to in just a moment. So we had to get you on this inaugural episode, but you are going to tell us right now, born and raised Northeast Ohio, so you know what people need to know. So what is it? What do people need to know about around here?
Oh, well, first of all, I mean, they need to know that we are in a fabulous region, so much to do. And I think all of us have really gotten to know the metro parks in our area lately, or just the outdoor spaces, the cool and neat things. And for me personally, my husband and I, we went to a lot of different places. And for the first time, I went to Euclid Beach Park, but, just as someone there to watch the sunset. Like I remember doing stories, when it was being constructed and things like that. But we went this summer and we sat there and we watched that sunset. And let me tell you, it was an awesome experience. It was absolutely beautiful. I think it is a gem in our area that not a lot of people really know about or have gone to and really experienced. So you need to know about that.
Okay, so that is definitely on my list. I, for sure, have been enjoying the metro parks as well. That's on my list. I'm so glad that we're starting off with this incredible hidden gem. So I kind of happened upon it because I saw some photos in this Hiking Northeast Ohio Facebook group. But I'm curious, how did you find out? How did it get on your radar to go to Euclid Beach Park?
Honestly, it was just, it just came to our minds, like we need to be doing some different things and go to places where we haven't really gone. And so, my husband is also from the area and I believe he's been before, but I hadn't gone, to watch the sunset. I know about a lot of things, I think, in this area, especially working here for so long as a reporter and also being born and raised in Northeast Ohio. But it's different when you can kind of just relax and go just as a regular citizen and enjoy the space. And so you hear a lot about it, about it. And it was just a matter of making it a priority, I think.
And I think this is important to say because there is a big debate over east side, west side. Euclid Beach Park is on the east side, so there are great things in the entire Northeast Ohio, greater Cleveland area. And you're from the west side, so I think that speaks to that, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm from the west side. I'm from Lorain, so far, far west, right? From there, and I lived on the west side, a little closer to the city of North Olmsted for a few years, but I'm an east sider now. So guess what? We had to explore the east side.
So it can be done.
Yeah.
It can be done. You can enjoy the west side. You can enjoy the east side. Okay, so that's our first need to know. Euclid Beach Park used to be the site of the Euclid Beach Amusement Park. There's definitely some cool relics of that there as well. Very Instagrammable moments, especially in addition to the sunset, right?
I have to share them, right? That's what we did. We took so many pictures there. It was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
All right. Well, there you have it. That's your first need to know here in NEO, Euclid Beach Park. Thanks for sharing that with us, Tiffany. Now, the reason we had to get you in first, in addition to the fact that you're just incredible, obviously, you were a great first choice, independent of the fact that you are about to go very west on us. What is going on? Where are you going?
Well, I am going to Toledo. I'm working at our sister station, WTOL in Toledo. I'll be the morning anchor there. So I'm very honored to be able to just take this next step, this next level in my career and do it in Toledo. It's so funny. My very first job in television was at this very same station. I was editing video for the noon newscast. That's how I started out in TV news. And I'm going back. So it's definitely full circle. Graduated from Bowling Green State University as well. So I know the area pretty well of Northwest Ohio. Definitely going to miss Northeast Ohio. This is home. But I'm excited for this next chapter. I really am.
Well, I'll tell you what, Toledo is really gaining for our loss here. Of course, we're very sad to see you go, but Toledo is gaining a bright star. You'll be shining there. Can't wait to see what you do out in Toledo. Obviously, it's right next door, so we'll be continuing to follow everything you do. And also let everybody know here where they can connect with you so that we can see what's up in Toledo, because we need to know. Those are our neighbors.
Oh, yeah, connect with me. So you can follow me on Facebook, Tiffany Tarpley TV. Also, Instagram is T3 on TV. And you can follow me on Twitter, Tiffany Tarpley. So connect with me there. Yeah, you can follow along with the journey. And who knows, one day, maybe Northeast Ohio will be home once again. Who knows?
Oh, we're getting you back, girl. You're coming back here. I have to ask, just out of curiosity, what's the 3? Is that for 3 News, or what's the T3? T3 on TV.
My first name begins with a T, my middle name begins with a T, and my last name begins with a T.
Oh, okay.
It's always, it has nothing to do with Channel 3.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure, because you are going to Toledo, so I wanted to make sure you weren't going to change up your social media on us, you know? We need to know. We need to stay connected.
Not at all. I've had so many nicknames over the years: T3, T cubed. For those who don't know, T squared, triple T. So T3 on TV. That's what I go by.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you very much for sharing the need to know with us, Tiffany, and we look forward to following you. Euclid Beach Park, get it in while you still can, and we know that you'll be back here. You'll be back here to see us.
It's definitely been a pleasure. Thank you, Stephanie.
All right, thanks, Tiffany. I just love Tiffany Tarpley. She is such a talented ray of sunshine. I'm so glad that we were able to get her in here for our first Need to Know segment. And I will share all of her links here too in the show notes so that you can make sure and connect with Tiffany. Now, one more thing before we go. Every week I will be leaving you with a good follow. This is somebody that you want in your feed. We hear people talk about it all the time. This person is a good follow on Instagram. This person is a good follow on Twitter. Well, every week we're going to talk about a good follow. And our first good follow is a man by the name of Ian Meadows. You can find him on Twitter and Instagram at urbanetics_. So that's URBANETICS_. And the reason that I love to follow Ian Meadows is because he posts the most beautiful photos of downtown Cleveland. And the reason that I started following him is because he was sharing all of these amazing bike ride routes. Come to find out, he lives in downtown Cleveland and he doesn't have a car, so he takes his bike everywhere. And he was just sharing all of these amazing trails that I never knew existed in downtown Cleveland. And I had to follow him. I think someone else that I followed must have retweeted him, and that's how I happened upon him. But he shares amazing photos of bike rides, the most beautiful sunsets in downtown Cleveland. If there's ever a rainbow in downtown Cleveland, he is on top of it, and he's posting the most gorgeous photos of it. And it makes my day better. And I think if you follow him, it'll make your day better too. And also, he's very in the know about development plans in the city of Cleveland, which makes sense because he is the assistant city planner and marketing coordinator at City Architecture, a local firm in downtown Cleveland. So Ian tells me that he just loves being downtown and he loves being a part of the downtown Cleveland Renaissance. So he shares things that make him love it so much. He hopes other people will discover it and love it as well. He's definitely doing his part to make that happen. So highly recommend you follow Ian Meadows at Urbanetics. Again, URBANETICS_, which of course will also be linked in the show notes. And that completes our first episode of 3 Things to Know from WKYC Studios. I hope you guys had a good time. I had a great time. Make sure you come back next week. Next week, we will be talking with the founder of Random Acts of Kindness Everywhere, Ricky Smith. We're going to be talking about paying it forward and everything that's going on with him. He was just on the Drew Barrymore show, by the way, so kind of a big deal, not only here in Northeast Ohio, and he is up for the Best Local Activist Award for Cleveland Scene this year, too. So we're going to hear a little bit more from him about that. If you had a good time, I hope that you will subscribe to the show and leave us a rating and a review so that we can connect with more people here in Northeast Ohio and hopefully keep doing this for a very, very long time. Thanks for hanging out with me, you guys. I will see you back here next week. I'm Stephanie Haney.
Thanks for listening to 3 Things to Know with Stephanie Haney from WKYC Studios. Subscribe now to stay in the know.